And I'll talk you through some of the things that we very typically do. Our setup is my students come typically 3 or 4 at a time, and that is their piano lesson for the week. It's an hour and 15-minute lesson, and I have a large room that accommodates 2 grand pianos, 1 non-grand, and 1 digital, full-size digital. So I have 4 keyboards available. Acoustic is a large part of my emphasis, and we have a big floor room so we can do our games. We have a marker board. We have a little ear tune chart on the wall. When everybody comes in with something they figured out by ear, we write it on the ear tune chart. We have a little keyboard station for computer games. And so all this is in one room. And then we have 2 other teaching rooms, which either can be breakout rooms, or if my associate and I are both teaching, we can be teaching simultaneous lessons. So we have some various opportunities. And we also have a bathroom, most necessary to be right there, and a waiting room, a little lobby. So it's a very nice setup for the kind of work that we do. But I want you to think about your setup and what you can do within the framework of your own studio, just as it is at the moment. That's what we're here for today. So here are my students, and in a typical day, you might see these things. First thing, they come in, and this is your little chart here. Wash up. That means their drill is they go into the bathroom, they wash their hands, they get everything, their art projects, everything off, the dust off their hands from school, from snacks, etc. And then they come in. Then they go to the pianos, and they do their warm-up for their technique. Hopefully they put their assignment sheet out on the piano, if they remember to bring it. And so it's there so we can refer and see what was on the assignment list for this week. And I can make sure that what I think I'm asking them to produce for the week, I actually wrote on the sheet, and that I didn't forget to write it. So they'll be doing their warm-ups for whatever their technique was independently, and then usually from that they launch into their latest piece they're working on. And as they're doing this, before we formally started the class together, I can get a little bird's eye view of what the students what they actually have done, what they produced for the week, and what they've gotten done with their pieces, what needs to be done, whether they've learned their 5-finger patterns or they're still struggling on memorizing them. So it gives me an idea what to work on for the day. It also lets me hear how their pieces really sounded, as in, it sounded better at home. Well, I can hear whether it really did sound better at home or not, because they're playing not under pressure, so I know exactly what the pieces sounded like. And at this time they're doing this all pretty much in the same room. They get into a little soundscape where, like an orchestra warming up, even though there's different pianos playing different pieces, they kind of get used to hearing their own sound, at least for that warm-up period. And if they really have trouble with that, they might say, can I go up into the other room? So after that, then we will convene together, and we might start with looking at our new technique. What are we learning today? In this format, everybody has to learn, everyone you teach has to learn the scale fingerings. Everybody has to learn, how to shape your hand, how to play expressively, etc. Why do we need to teach this individually, student after student? Why not teach whatever we have to teach new all together? So we can have a presentation of that. In the case of something like scale fingering, if they're just learning the concept of playing on the black keys, and the thumb has to go on a white key, it's sometimes valid for them to try several fingerings and see if they can discover that it makes sense for the thumb to go on the white key. And if they discover that themselves, it's going to make more sense to them, and they're going to be more responsive to doing that. That's just one example where we can do a little discovery time where they can experiment, and we come to an idea together. So if we're doing something that the teacher wants to demonstrate, we'll do a little field trip over to one piano. So everybody comes over to the one piano, and they all cluster around, and they'll watch the demonstration of what it is that we're trying to demonstrate, whether it's how to produce a nice down-up phrasing, or whatever our new concept is. And then they try it, and they check each other, and they help each other listen and see if they're really producing the sound they need. And then they can go back to their own pianos and try it out a little bit to make sure. And I can sort of survey all the students and see how well they're doing. So that's how a new technique would be presented. Then we're going into a new theory concept or something about music that we're learning. So in this case, they would get out their, for example, their Robert Pace books where there are short musical examples that introduce an important music concept that's going to be seen recurringly from one piece to another, to another, to another. So they'll put their books out on the piano, and this is the time where we play a game called Many Questions. This is very teacher-directed. I ask a question about the music, and they give an answer. They don't have to raise their hands, they just call out the answers. So we're studying the example by way of exploring to learn the new concept. So the questions we might ask are, what key is this piece in? What's the rhythm pattern? Where are the what kind of pattern are the steps and skips making? Is it a sequence? Is it a repeated pattern? What's the dynamic marking? What's the articulation? And as they answer the questions, we discover what's the concepts in the piece. Then we may clap the rhythm together, shape it, point to the notes and the intervals, and say whatever we need to do to prepare it. Then it'll be time for the students to find the 5-finger pattern on the piano, and then we'll set a count, one, ready, play, and they'll play together. So they practice a little sight reading. Then we'll give them a minute to, in their own independent time, play it again and correct whatever mistakes they might have made. So once the melody is secure, then we'll look at the chords, and we'll say, what's the chord structure? Is it 1, 5, 5, 1? Is it 1, 1, 1, 5? So we'll name the chords. We'll find those in the left hand. The next step will be play the right hand with the chords blocked in blocked form. So if the melody is, for example, they will have already been successful at the melody because we practiced it. Now we're going to add the chords in with blocked form. And then once we are successful in getting the chord with the melody, the next step would be perhaps we're learning about taking that chord and how we can decorate it by making a block chord or a broken chord. So we take the melody and make the left hand into a broken chord or a waltz. So we'll play with that for until we understand those concepts. Now, if that's the example that we're working on, how do you deal with students who are, the really crackerjack ones that just, they get it, they're so good, they get it right off? Well, they can, say it's the broken chord that you're working on. Well, they got that, the other ones are still working on the broken chord. You say, okay, how about you try the waltz bass? Well, if they get that, okay, well, you try it in another key. If they get that, well, how about if you put what if you put the chords in the right hand and the melody in the left hand? If they get that, well, here's another example right across the page that's a piece that's very similar, but, slightly different. You try that one. So even within this little sound space where they're all experimenting with this one example, those who are less adept at getting it quickly, they're still struggling with the first thing that you were working on. The other one can still be challenged to do yet one more thing with that piece. And so within the group, you can have slight variations in how fast people pick things up, how fast they read, how coordinated they are. But everyone is still learning for that day something new in that concept. Does that make sense? So that's one example of learning something new on a, say, level 1. Or I say level 1, I gave you a level 1 example, but this can be for whatever level on the advanced level 2 that we're learning. And similarly, on a less complicated level. In the case of, just excuse me 1 minute. Okay, we'll come back to, so that's how a theory presentation of something new would be learned. And here's where I think you have to just, get some idea of how to group your students. You need to have students who, what you're presenting to them is basically new for that day. So there can be variation in their actual skill level for being able to coordinate it and absorb it, but if it's something that you group them according to their experience level for what they know about music, so that every day you're presenting something new to them. Now, moving on, after we've done our little theory example and our technique example, it might be time for everyone to learn a new piece. Maybe it's the beginning of the year, or we just had a recital and everybody's just dying to try something, get into some new repertoire. Or you're trying to figure out what they should play for their AIM exams this year. So we set up our little chairs, sitting chairs, everybody sits, and they get a little Post-it sized piece of paper and a pencil. And then we have a sound sample. So I'll play maybe 12, 15 pieces from similar repertoire books of likely pieces that would be at their level. And they write down what pieces appeal to them. So I don't play the whole piece, but I give a little sample. And at the end of that period, they'll have a little list of maybe, well, some of them will have, 8 pieces, and some of them will have maybe 1, And so I'll collect them and I'll look at them. So, sometimes we won't do anything with them that week because I want to, absorb and kind of figure out of the list which is the best piece for the student for their needs at that time. Or I need to make sure I have enough books, for this repertoire. But the value there is that one thing I learned early in teaching is that students are motivated to practice the pieces that they like, that they picked, and they're not motivated to practice pieces they don't like. And I'm not a good motivator to get them to learn how to practice pieces they don't like. So the easier strategy out of all the pieces in the world that would work for that level is to find things that make them say, I want to learn that, or wow, that's really cool. And I'm not always the best judge. Now, when I pick those pieces, I often will have, as you all do, you look and you say, this will be a perfect piece for this person, so those might be the ones I play first, thinking maybe they'll, get excited about those first and put those down for a choice. But sometimes I'm totally wrong. I think this will be great for a person, and they don't put it on their list. So the list really gives me a true concept, and they love that aspect. So that's called sound sampling, and that's a very fun activity. Now we're getting into pieces that they are working on. So say they picked something from the sound sample. So if this is a new piece, if several people have picked the same piece, that's very convenient because you know, one of the things that you study in a new piece, when you prepare a new piece, you go through, let's talk about a few things. You put a new piece in front of students, what do you study with them? Time signature, key signature.
Get used to the rhythm.
Get used to the rhythm.
Look for recurring patterns.
Recurring patterns.
What does it say about how you should play it?
What does it say about how you should play it? All of the things that you do with one student, you can do that with a group of students. You're just asking the questions and studying together, and then you get the collective, you know, answers back from the students. So that would be something that we can do, and then they can go try it. And when they try it, they'll go into their little individual stations and work on the piece. At that point, then we can do kind of a rotational thing where I can rotate and kind of tune in and see how everyone's doing with starting it. Those who need the most help, I can help with them, or you know, just call them in one by one to the area where I am. And the little breakout stations are very helpful because I can hear them all. You know, like in a conservatory, you can always hear the trumpet player next door. You can hear what's going on, but it's enough separated that you can work on your individual things. And of course, as a teacher of children, I know that if I don't hear anything coming from that room, that you know, within a few seconds or minutes, I need to go in, because if I don't hear anything, that means, you know, they're up to something. So you know, you have your ears open at all times. If the students are young and you're working in a method book where everybody's working on the same pieces, we might do something like a practice steps chart here, which I can pass around, but we take a little fuzzy bear, one of those little bears you get at the fabric stores, and it says, choose a piece, clap shorts and longs, hand shape, show the direction of the piece, point to the notes and say, step up, skip down, play it in the air, whatever, you know, your preparations are. So it's all organized so that when they finally get to the piano to play, they've organized their piece so that they'll be successful in playing it. And then at the 7th step, it says play 3 times, and then A at the top, because they've done it successfully.
I like the airplay stuff.
So, well, everybody has their air piano that they bring with them all the time, you know. So sometimes
we train with you and everything.
We pull it out, and then we have to talk about, you know, what color it is, and I have to give them a minute to describe that and get into it. So, so if you want to see this, it's here. So do you see how that can work as a, you know, everybody studying together, and then we're still working on independent ways. In the beginning stages, if you teach the students to read well and to have good strategies for learning a piece, and to understand their chords and their structures and so forth, so that they understand all the notes in the piece, and you don't give them a piece that's beyond their understanding, they'll be more independent learners. They will be able to learn more on their own and get more done during the week. It's not uncommon for the students to bring a whole, you know, sonatina in fully learned from the week, you know, that we didn't go over note by note, but because they've become such independent learners, they they've absorbed it on their own. And then, of course, on the marker board, there goes a big fat yay, because that's such an exciting thing to have a full-fledged piece come back. In the case of repertoire, there's a piece that is very popular with the kids in the Malagueña. It's in the Alfred books, and they like it because it goes all over the piano, and it starts. And there's a low chord and a high chord, and it's easy to understand the patterns, but here's a case where if several students like the piece and they're learning it, and one of them has totally gotten where all the parts go, then you can just tell that student to go and help the other one. It's I lose patience trying to try to keep explaining. This hand goes inside, the right hand goes inside the left hand, and so let the other student do it, kid to kid, in kid language. That kid just had to figure out how to explain it to himself. So, he's more in tune with the complexities of it than a teacher who everything is obvious to the teacher, who's been playing for years and years. So let that student go in the other room with the other one and get it all worked out. What the students learn by teaching each other, when they first do that, they'll show, and then they'll say, did you teach them? Oh yeah, well, did they do it? I don't know. Well, if you're a teacher, you have to stick around and see if what you said, worked. If it didn't, you have to think of another way to say it. So when you teach, you learn as well. So that's one thing that they learned, is to be very good at expressing the musical aspects. During this repertoire time, you can always group students in. I'm very fond of working with 3 in a group, because you can do, 2 people can do one thing while one person's doing something else with you. And there's lots of opportunities for, pairing people up, but keeping track of everybody, but still moving things forward. Okay, now after our repertoire, I think obviously in an hour and 15 minutes, not every single thing on the list is going to get into one lesson, but these are all things that may happen in a day. So now they've been working on their songs, and what I hear so often is, can we have a mini recital? That means that the student is very excited about a piece that they're working on. They may or may not have it 100% perfected, but they're so excited they want to share it with everyone. So again, we set up the little chairs, and we sit and we just play our songs for each other. What is the value of that? They're playing every week for their peers. Sometimes it's perfect, sometimes it's not, it's a work in progress. But they're sharing, and they become very respectful about listening to each other. If they're up there and they lose their place in the music, we just sit and listen and give them a minute to find their way back. So they gain composure at the piano in front of an audience, and the audience gains listening skills. And of course, if it goes on too long, there are mistakes, or then we just kind of shortcut the piece a little bit. But it's the regular aspect of playing in front of each other and sharing ideas and sharing constructive criticisms, etc., that make them become very comfortable playing in front of folks. And all of us know too many closet pianists that just will not play in front of, especially their musical colleagues, because they're afraid that they'll notice if your trill isn't done just right, or the rhythm is off, or you played the wrong inversion of the chord in that Chopin left hand, and so the consequences, you don't play, and that, I believe, will never happen with these students, because they're playing in front of people is what they do. And they know that it's not always going to be perfect, but we strive for getting the best we can at that moment, and then working from there. So mini recitals are very exciting. Motivational listening. Miss Julie, what are you playing? In the mini recital, often they want to hear something that I do. So I can play some more things that will be what they're going to be doing soon. Or I can just pick something that I'm excited about working on personally and play a little sample of that. The more advanced pieces they hear, or advanced beyond their level, the more they see, oh, if I stick with this, there's something down the road that I'm very excited about doing. Or I might ask them for a request, and if I know it, I can do it. So even just a little phrase or a few phrases of a piece are motivational that way. Other things that we do spur of the moment on snowy days. In our beautiful picture window, we see the snow coming, and it's just an exquisite experience. I put on the CD of The Snow is Dancing, or I play it myself, and we just enjoy that moment. Or if the wind is blowing in the trees like this way, we think of, what could you play that would go with that music? Can you think of some pieces? Something stormy or
You want the name of a piece to go with it? Rustle of Spring, Christian Sending.
Yeah. So, bringing the outside world into our environment is part of life. That's to be celebrated. Okay, page 2.
Wind. Got to go.
Now, it's time for, can we play a game today? If we don't play a game, I'm going to hear that. So
Is that your code?
if I miss a game for at least 2 weeks, I'm certainly going to hear it. So that's time to play a game for. We have things we always have to practice. We have to practice whatever it is: note names, intervals, key signatures, chords, inversions, our scales for aim. On and on it goes all through. So the games are the way that we can reinforce those in a fun and a playful way, and incorporate different learning modes as we do it, because we see the chords spelled out, we can hear them, we play them. We're seeing them from different perspectives than just with our hands over the keys all the time. And that's a subject for another seminar that I do on games. Seasonal fun. Let's bring in, we all like to celebrate the seasons. Trim the Tree with ABC is a game that we'll be doing now that Thanksgiving's over, starting next week. On the marker board is a, very basically drawn, typical Christmas tree outline. And there's a pile of little letters that say ABC, the little round, colorful letters that have magnets. A pile of ABC, those are the ornaments. And there's a pile of flashcards for note names or chords, if we're working on chords. And the students take a flashcard. Well, they take a letter, and they match them up. They match, say they pick an A, then they have to find an A flashcard or an A lead chord, take it to the piano, play it, and then they get to come and put that letter on the Christmas tree, as in putting the ornament on the tree, and then they put the little flashcard. There's a little present box drawn in the base of the marker board, and they put the present in there. It becomes a game. So that's something we'll do for Christmas, Halloween fun. We dim the lights. We play. Think of our spookiest song we know. We improvise on minor or 12th tone or bitonal or all these different diminished things, different things we can do. And we maybe will get glow-in-the-dark gloves and go in, a room that's perfectly dark and see if we can play a little bit of a piece with that. Anything that, brings the fun of the season. into what we're doing. Sight reading for animals. Sight reading is a big, part of being able to absorb a lot of music. And here's a case where students may be uneven in their class in terms of their sight reading skills too. So sight reading for animals is simply, we take typical books, method books, maybe the Faber books, because they have a lot of examples to read. And at whatever is the easy reading level for the students, they will take that in, and for every piece they read, they come in and pick up a Beanie Baby stuffed animal from the animal bin. So in the course of maybe a 15-minute period, they'll have a little stack of animals here. And it's the animal part that make them willing to do that. If you say to a student, I want you to sit and read through these pieces for 15 minutes. Well, how exciting is that? But you know who I found out go for those animals the most? The 8th grade boys, freshman boys, 5th grade boys. Who knew? And they fight over them, there's fights over the little, crazy monkey and so forth. So in the course of doing that over time, it's like a built-in way to reinforce their sight reading for these kids who would balk at, maybe because of their teenage years, they don't want to be playing pieces they're not very good at. So this builds their sight reading so that they can incorporate repertoire at a more advanced level. Bringing in the outside musical world. I always have this feeling that piano lessons live in kind of a little box over here in students' world. And then they have school and family and friends and extracurricular activities, and that's the real world for them, and TV and video games and so forth. So how do we bring this big thing, which is the bulk of their being, into this little box that's piano lessons here? That's our job. In groups, you can do that a lot easier. I've always got my antenna up for what's happening in your school, music in school right now, or what's happening in your world. They'll come in and they'll say, we have an assembly tomorrow. Oh, what are you doing? Listen for the pieces. Maybe we have that piece in our lending library that we can play or, use it to learn something about chords from. Maybe they would like to just put everybody sit, and during the sharing time, that could be, they can sing the song they're doing, or they can even recite the poem if they have a part that's a poem. So it's important to do that. In 5th grade, many of the students, that's when they start playing a band instrument. So bring that in, even if you've just had it for 2 weeks and you've only learned how to put the parts together or pull it out and, do whatever mysterious things you have to do for those other instruments. That in itself is something that's valid for the other students to see, and if the students can play Ode to Joy or Jingle Bells or something that's very elementary, let's find a way to make 1 and 5 chord accompaniment out of that. So we can start having an ensemble in 5th grade, ensemble experiences. Use that pianist for the things that, that's going to make the pianist world a social world. All the kids, they all come in 3rd grade and say, we're doing recorder. We're doing the recorder karate thing with the little strings for every song that they learn. And so, even with Hot Cross Buns, which is the first song everybody learns, set a steady beat. One student can do just a ostinato steady beat. And then the recorder student can proudly play Hot Cross Buns with it. What are you learning from that? Well, you're learning steady beat, you're learning ensemble, you're learning you need a count off, you have to listen to each other. Very basic, but very profound, because if you start learning to be collaborative musicians, when you're 7, 8, 6, 7, 8 years old, you got the rest of your life, musical life, to do that. And you will. Okay, improvisation. This is something we do almost every week. You've heard perhaps all of the pentatonic styles. We do in typically a round robin style, so the students will be sitting at the pianos, and I'll just give an example. Let's say we're doing pentatonic cowboy style. So I'll play a question. Let's see. Let's see. Get my cowboy hat on here. That would be a question, and the student A would answer. And then I would ask a question for student B, music question, and they would tell their answer. And we go back and forth like that across the room. What you learn from improvising often, you learn to be on the spot and you have to keep going. You may have had an idea that was very clear to you until the moment it's time to start, and then it evaporates. Well, you got to bring it back. It's your turn, so you have to keep going. You learn that you'll hear students say, "Oh, mine wasn't very good." Well, to us it sounded fine. You learn that things sometimes sound better to the people around you than what you think. And you learn to give and take and, listen and evaluate to each other. So besides the musical benefits of improvisation, we learn important life skills from that too. 12-bar blues, this is something we do very elementary level from level 1, and then students have the rest of their life to learn to play blues in more complex forms, and we learn them in all keys. So if your little clarinet, 5th grade clarinet player, B-flat clarinet comes in, we pianists, we know how to transpose to B-flat to do the 12-bar blues in B-flat. So the clarinet player can play, maybe it's only their 3rd week and they only know 2 notes, they don't know all 5 notes to make a full blues scale. So they can improvise on 2 notes, and we pianists could play the chords to go with. So there's always something on the basic level that you could do to incorporate students in. Duets are obvious, benefit of working with students together. But it can be formal duets that are already published, or you can make duets out of just taking one student plays the right hand, one student plays the left hand. Several people can do double on one hand, or you can make up a 3rd part, or you can take some of the multi-piano, ensemble pieces that are published. But there's tons of opportunities in that realm that that's a natural. Computer work, we'll break away and do my favorite games. Mostly what I do is Music Ace. How many people are familiar with that? It's very, very cute. And composition, just in the summer we'll do composition projects with our finale and let the students work collaboratively on learning how to use the software program to make songs. They love that, and they have strong opinions how the song should go and what they want to put in it. So that's a very valuable thing you can do. You can do it independently, but collaboratively is nice. And finally, visiting week. Every semester we invite the parents in to show all this. So now the students have a little bigger audience than just their peers. So it's a good performing opportunity. Helps them get ready for the formal recitals. And the parents bond. They get to share stories, and the siblings come, and they're getting their juices wetted for when it's going to be, they're all going to be old enough to come. And everybody gets a turn to participate. They're always invited to play. If the parents have any song they want to do, no matter if it's Frere Jacques or something real simple, or they play another instrument, they're always invited because we want to instill this feeling that music is fun to be shared. And, you know, let's get it out there, the word out into the community that, you know, you can be invited to share your music. And so that's a big, a fun day. And it also gives teachers a chance to explain how they're teaching, give some examples of, you know, your particular approach to teaching in a large sense. And also get the bulletin, you know, make sure that they know when the next recital is or whatever things you want to communicate to them. So, in the course of studying together regularly, students come to realize that everyone has something to offer the class that is unique to them. One might be the best at coordinating, one is a super psychotic plan ahead that some people learn several pieces. Some people all they can do is get one really good one down. So it usually goes to the person who that's all they can play, you know. But we try to plan ahead so that that doesn't happen. In this case, that just came up last week because two students who are very well matched in terms of they're great at everything. They're great at coordination. They're great at reading. Their ears are good. They learn solfeggiato in tandem together, and they were both equally excited, and they just pulled each other along. They learned it so well. So I asked the other one was absent that day, you know, what if you both want to play that? Well, either she was fine with it. If he's fine with it, then I would just put them in two different places. If they're not, you know, they both have other pieces that they play because they're such crackerjack kids. They've got a bunch of stuff. So they could do it, one could do it now, one could do it later. Or if they both want to do it, but they don't want to, you know, both do it at the same time, I said, well, maybe we'll just have to do a drawing and, you know, random, pick one out of the hat, and you get it, so that it's, so we've been working through ideas, and I haven't heard from him yet what he's going to say. So, but chances are one of them is going to, in the end, if it becomes, I'll just play this other piece.
But the real question is, if you only teach group lessons, and you've got 4 kids in the group lesson, and they're each preparing something different for the recital, how do you find enough time to focus on those 4 individual pieces preparing for a recital in the group setting?
In that, towards the recital, that becomes more of the focus of what we do, so we spend more time on the recital pieces. That's when the kids say, can we play a game today, you know, because we've been polishing. But they get coached practice during the time. So, you know, when your students come, they come with 75% of the piece good, 25% are those measures that are not so good. So we work on those 25%. So with a practice strategy. So in their little coached times, you know, they'll, this is a multiple times counter. So you need to do this one measure because this is the measure that's just not there yet. Everything stops when you get to the measure. So take this in to your little practice station. Here's a little stuffed bear to keep track. And, you know, when you finish the first repetition, you put the bear on here. When you finish the second repetition, you put it on here. And come back and show me when you've gotten through 6, and we'll try it out. If it's not good after 6, we're going to go around with the bear again one more time. That's one thing you could do. Another one, maybe you need to go in and try long, short, long, short, long, short, long for the whole, you know, this whole page of solfeggiato. So you go try that. So those strategies, practice strategies that you want them to do at home, we can try those in the lesson. So while some are practicing, that's the chance to hear the other one. Sitting and doing little mini recitals gives us a chance to hear how the piece is coming out truly in front of a small audience several weeks before too, so that from the mini recital, you know, we can make notes about what needs improvement. So it's a matter of consolidating, you know, learning pieces doesn't have to be taught spoon-fed note by note to a student. And if they learned it well in the beginning, they're not going to have as many things to, you know, fix as they get on. So it's a continual juggling and moving, you know, moving people around. But if we're teaching them coaching them on how to practice efficiently during the week, they need to practice how to do that. So they can practice how they do that in little mini times while someone else is getting specific direction from the teacher.
You sound like a great multitasker.
Well, maybe there's some other words that are flaky this morning. But yeah.
I have a
Good
question.
Ideas?
Because I teach a beginning piano class for children, and it's only a half an hour long, and sometimes it can be from 5 students to about 10, and they usually know absolutely nothing. So that's not a lot of time to get things going, and I was just wondering what would be your approach for absolute beginners in a group lesson that know absolutely nothing. They don't know what anything is.
I can hardly imagine teaching beginning students without doing it in a group, actually, because in the beginning they don't know anything, like you said, and everything has to be practiced. So that's where we do a game for interval. You know, first it's steps and skip reading, then we add the thirds and the fourths and fifths as time goes on. But they need a game for that. They need a game for piano races on the piano, just to find where their ABCs are. They need a game for rhythm. They need a game for every. In order to be a beginning student, you need to know so many things in that first 6 months of lessons. So making them in game form makes it more approachable, and they get more done. Half an hour is truly a anguishing amount of time, but you just, you try to keep introducing new things, because if you come around to it the next week, they'll get it. And that's my answer, is, that's the best format for starting individual students.
And having them play the same thing.
Yeah, they would play the same thing. Yeah, the individual repertoire comes later, when they're after they can read well, and they know their 5-finger patterns, they know their scales, enough that the notes in repertoire make sense. So that's a good point. And you had a question, Tim, or a comment?
Mine's an awkward one.
Right.
The bottom of your last sheet said one of the good reasons to do it is accessible tuition fees. And I'm assuming you're meaning for the parents of the students. So that would be my question. If you were a teacher who did private and group lessons, do you offer your group lessons at a reduced rate, or are you doing it at the same? I just wondered
Here's a
what that
question
meant.
for the group here. Ours, everybody comes 1 time a week. And let me just specify that I've evolved into from my original Robert Pace training, which is the Robert Pace concept is you have what's called a dyad, a partner lesson with 2 people for half an hour, and then you have a group lesson for 45 minutes. So they get the hour and 15-minute time period. The group lesson could be from 2 to 6 or 8 people. The partner lesson is 2 or maybe even 3 people. But in that time period, you could accommodate, in the same day, you could accommodate 2 people coming for half an hour. They join up with 2 other people for the next 45 minutes. The first 2 leave, and the second 2 stay for the second half hour. That way, in the partner lesson, you can focus on the repertoire more specifically. And they would be doing perhaps mostly the same pieces, but some variation. But the group, we would be doing the introducing technique, improvisation, the games, all the playing for each other, all those things you can do. And I started that early on, and I, as you can see from my ideas of what to do in a day, I just couldn't rope myself in to doing what we were supposed to do in the partner lesson during that time, and etc. So then I just ended up merging the students all together, and that's how we came to have that hour and 15-minute time. But the original question was about the tuition. So they pay one fee, and it's a fee that is less than market value for an individual lesson, but it's, if you take it as a fee of a model of 3 students per that time, it becomes, you know, not even compatible, but more than that. That's balanced with the fact that I have a lot of overhead with renting a space, so my job is to make sure I maximize that space, and that, you know, takes care of the more bodies that are in there throughout the day, the more the overhead is offset by students. In terms of the group, maybe you have an answer because you do that.
I only do 3 group lessons in a year, and the people are charged what they normally pay for their private lesson, which is only a half-hour lesson. But they're getting an hour and a half group lesson. So if you really did the math, it's like I was getting 1 student's fee extra because I have 4 in a group lesson. However, the parents totally understand that I put a ton of work into every group lesson. I either create games or buy new games every year. They always have a homemade snack, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, they're paying a minuscule amount more for the group lesson, but that's what I do. So they're just charged what their half-hour lesson rate is, but they're getting an hour and a half group lesson. Yeah.
I think the question is, how can we incorporate groups? An important question is, how can we incorporate some of the fun of collaborative music making into our private studios, even if we're not planning to just switch everything over to group. And some easy ways are just dovetail 2 students, just at least for part of the time, you know, get a duet going between 2 students who are coming back to back. And during that time, okay, so you play the duet together, but you also, well, let's throw a game in, you know. If they've never played a music game together, they'll be, and you will be delighted about how much fun it is. They'll be asking for that game the next week too. So if you build it, they will come, you know, is truly the thing. If you see how much fun it is for students to work together, then that 15-minute period you overlap them might turn out to be half an hour, and pretty soon, oh, why don't you just come together, you know? So that's one easy way that you can start. In the summer is a great way to do this all in groups. You know, you can have either people are looking for different options, more fun options for summer, so you can have a little piano camp. Whatever you do in summer, if you call your piano lessons piano camp, it's gonna feel like more fun. So so you can have, for example, something where everybody comes 2 hours a day, and then you can do rotating activities, a repertoire, sight reading, all the different things that we say here, or some special projects. So summer would be a way that you can just totally go with group and stay within the format you're in and not worry about whether they think you're shifting gears on them. With little kids, it makes perfect sense to have kids together. You know, who can sit with a 4-year-old, you know, for more than 5 minutes at the bench? You know, little kids love to play together. So in my case, I started in the community with my Moppets, my 4- and 5-year-olds, and then I just, oh, by the way, this is how we go. And so they just stayed in their groups as they got older. Was there any other summer? Oh yeah, listening to how AIM. I mean, this is doing your AIM practice for the AIM exams. makes perfect sense. Get us, why should you as an individual teacher every week have to come in and go through the litany, okay, play this scale, play this, now we're gonna do the ear training test, now we're gonna do, why not get them together and do it all at one time? And get the folks who are doing skills together. It could be, maybe you have to find a Sunday afternoon time or something. If you start this the first year at an appropriate time before your theory exams, maybe the first year you'll get 2 people. But if it becomes something that you do routinely, then the students will come to look forward to it. And if you serve pizza or you have, some kind of treat, that will make it even more fun. So, for example, you can get we do a lot of spinner games. Get a spinner of any kind, as long as it will spin. Get some flashcards and put your scales that you need to be studying in a wheel around the spinner. The things that are going to be on the AIM exam, and then have the kids spin, and then they can test each other, or you can, I think that helps in the overall idea that when you go into that AIM exam, part of the stress of it is that it's a random thing. You're going to sit there and you're going to be, now do this, now do this, now do this. So if they've practiced the randomness through the spinner game, they have a little more sense of being prepared for this scale or this. Plus it makes it more fun.
Where do you find spinners?
Oh, spinners. Well, I brought these 2 catalogs, which I get a lot of stuff from. Music in Motion, which you can look at here. It's musicmotion.com if you go, without the in, if you go online. And Music Treasures is another one that's got good stuff. So there's a spinner that has little musical pictures and things on it that was a real tactily good spinner. And we use those, and we don't even do the games that are on there, we just use it for the spinner. So sometime we'll get around to playing with the actual symbols that they put on there. But that would be sitting the students down and have them play their pieces for each other, getting little mock critiques. If you do this well in advance so that the students have some chance to improve on their pieces. You don't want to be doing this the week before and have them get criticism from their peers, that will undermine their confidence. But have them listen with their little score sheets and honestly critique, what's good, where the pluses are, so that they're getting peer encouragement and peer reinforcement, peer constructive criticism. It's going to mean more to the students when another student says, here's something I've tried, or maybe you should do that a little bit slower. Have we ever said that to our students? So I would encourage that if you do a lot of AIM exams. And adults, let's talk about that for a minute. Some adults, perhaps group isn't the way to go, but what I like is if I find several people who are kind of similar in, maybe I've got a group of 3 that is, I'll say between 45 and 60. I think that'll, work in case they hear this. And so they have, similar outlooks, similar interests, similar, they know if you go for some pop standards, it's going to be sort of from the same era of things they like American songbook things. So some things we do are, one activity is, but we'll be working on perhaps a sonatina together, Clementi sonatina and C. So we'll do the same things, we'll study the patterns, and then they'll be practicing on their own. As they're doing that, I can listen, I can look and see, oh, this person's having trouble with this fingering right here. This person, this measure is really bothering them. So then, we can stop and we can look at those things together so everybody can benefit from the same thing that everybody's probably having trouble with. They're very vocal. Students feel very vocal in the group to express what they think. Often with the students, they'll say things that I didn't even, it's as though I'm not there. Even if they're talking socially about things, you know, it's like, well, did you really want me to hear that? You know, and so I find that very helpful because I want to know what they're thinking. And that brings me to close, I think, with this anecdote that I was supposed to start with. But I was going to tell the story of what happened last Tuesday with my little 430 girls to explain why group is so wonderful, in my opinion. So two of the girls were in class. They were looking at a bagatelle. I think it's Hook, Bagatelle from the paper book, and they were looking at the patterns, the repeating patterns, and all this. So Abby comes in a few minutes late, so she gets it. She goes wash up. She puts her books down. She comes over and says, "Abby, come over. We're looking at the repeating patterns." Oh, she said, "There's one, and there's one, and there's one, and I have a lot of repeated patterns in my piece, Canario, and I'm really getting good at it. I got it memorized, and your mother lets you put nail polish on." My mother doesn't do that. And then she looks at me, and you got a haircut yesterday. So, that's the enthusiasm level that comes in. That's what makes it fun. The idea that I knew from I knew that she was excited about showing off her piece that day. We were doing transfer of learning from one piece to another, and it was helpful to me to know that they pay attention to what we look like, what we wear, and that's important too. So that's the close of my hopefully inspirational talk. And I do want to encourage you to look past those little things that we brought up, all those issues, because they're going to be there, but look at ways that you can get your students collaboratively working together from early levels so that they have the rest of their life to enjoy making music together. Thank you. So if you have any more